let me introduce a couple of very great speakers who are going to really update you on the Heartlands and the priorities for the Heartland's major transport infrastructure. In a few moments, we're going to hear from Nick Harris, the new Chief Executive of, I almost said Highways England. But he's the Chief Executive of National Highways. I mean, I think they changed the name basically just to keep people like me really on their toes. But no, welcome Nick, Chief Executive of National Highways, who's going to really give you an update on, I suppose, the wider highways picture, National Highways picture, but also specifically the A47 and the Black Cat scheme. So if it's in your area and you want to put some questions to Nick about that, then get ready to push the button. But before that, let me introduce Will Gallagher. Will is Strategy Director for East West Rail Company. Will, give us an update. Where are we with the East West Rail Company? We've heard a lot about it this morning. Give us your take on it. Will, the floor is yours.
Brilliant, thanks very much, and good morning, everyone. So the update is there to be seen in reality. When you're sort of heading between Bicester and Bletchley, you can see Winslow Station beginning to take place. We've opened some footbridges already. We have commissioned our first piece of track. So in that Oxford to Milton Keynes connection, we are already seeing very real progress. Also, since we were last together, we have launched the non-statutory consultation into where the route alignment should go for the route between Bedford and Cambridge in the context of a wider consultation, which I think in the scale of the documentation that went with it, you could get a sense of the enormity actually of the East-West Rail scheme and all the things that we need to consider. For me, the thing that I just wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on today is yes, the progress that we're making, but also not to lose the fact that we need to continue to make the case for investing in East-West Rail. And that's important this week because of the spending review next, but it's important more generally too, because there are, as we've heard, huge potential, there's huge attributes, great opportunities in terms of England's economic heartland and the areas that we all serve or call home. But we shouldn't also miss the fact that this investment is absolutely necessary. Yes, this area is one of the most productive in the UK, but actually it has half the level of productivity that you find in high-tech clusters like Silicon Valley. Yes, by national standards, looking at national averages, overall, this area is very prosperous. But actually, in this area, we have at least 12 areas that are in the bottom 10% of areas of multiple deprivation. As we heard from Naomi earlier on, this area has some of the highest car use in the country as well. And so the case for investing in rail infrastructure is absolutely critical to be made, because it's only by connecting places that we're able to spread prosperity across the arc, that we're able to increase the productivity by bringing businesses, their customers, and their people closer together. So I am consistently out there making the case for East-West Rail and investment in the local transport network, and I would encourage you to do the same. But I think there's a deal that goes with investing in the local transport network, and that is you can't just deliver transport in the same old way. And that's why at East-West Rail we're clear our job is to deliver a railway that is cheaper for the taxpayer, that is better for the customer, that is greener for the environment, and that is delivered more quickly than industry norms. And what do we mean by that? So in terms of better for the customer, what are some of the things that we've been doing? Like the team from England's Economic Heartland, we've been looking at the customers who are likely to use our railway. We've been thinking about the journeys that they take, not just on our trains, but also, really critically, how they make their full end-to-end journeys. And I was really pleased that England's Economic Heartland and East West Railway Company together co-commissioned a piece of work to look at I think we talk about first mile, last mile connectivity, but ultimately it goes beyond those first and last miles and is about how you create a fully integrated transport system. And East West Rail is really aware of our responsibility to be at the heart of that. But also, when people do come into contact with our railway, making sure things like stations, making sure the interiors of trains, all of those sorts of things are designed with the customer in mind at the start. We talk about being cheaper for the taxpayer. So what does that look like? Well, that's about making sure we really think very clearly at the start about what we're designing, so we avoid duplication. Why think about 5 systems when you can pay for one if you think about designing as an integrated system? We heard earlier on from Mayor Dave that we're really pleased again to be working with England's economic heartland, that in that first phase of East West Rail between Bicester and Bletchley where we're constructing, we're laying down fibre connectivity, which is significantly cheaper for the taxpayer and also contributes to the overall development of the arc. We talk about greener for the environment, and I know I'm going to face some questions on electrification later on, and we can talk about that at that point. We are looking at new technologies alongside electrification in that context. But really, our aim is to be a net zero carbon railway, both in construction and in operation. Next year, we'll be setting out our carbon baseline and our trajectory to net zero. We shouldn't kid ourselves. It's an easy thing to say, it's a much harder thing to do, and it is going to take the ingenuity of our organization, our partners, and the industry as a whole to take that journey, to deliver what I think is an ambitious objective in terms of net zero. And then we talk about delivering quicker than industry norms. And again, that comes from thinking about the way we engage through the consenting process. It comes to things about the way we construct our supply chain. There's a whole variety of things that we are looking at to make sure we get going as quickly as we possibly can, and that we keep that momentum in the program as well. So, in short, we've got a lot of stuff going on, and we are making real progress, and we'll continue to make progress both this year and next year, setting out our preferred route alignment and moving into statutory consultation. It's a much-needed scheme, and we should not stop making the case for its investment. But that investment comes with a bargain, which is we're committed to a better, cheaper, quicker, greener railway, and that's something we want to work with you to achieve. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Will. Very interesting project. Certainly key as a backbone of this region. It's a very interesting key project. I'm going to put some questions to Will a bit later on, as you all are also. But first, Nick Harris, Chief Executive of National Highways. Nick, give us a quick update what's happening around the roads. And I suppose answer that question that I almost put to the Minister, are roads the future?
Thank you, and good morning. And thank you for the invitation to be here with you this morning. It's a great venue and interesting to hear what's going on out on the track there. So are roads the future? I'm going to come to that in a moment, so bear with me. But I was going to kick off with, well, yes, we have a new name, National Highways. Phew, I got that right. And a newish CEO. It was very kind of them to give both me and the company the same initials, which can be a bit confusing when we take minutes in meetings. I'm quite clear the actions are always those of the company, but we're working our way through that. But we have a different name, but we have the same aim, which is connecting the country. So yes, roads are the future, or an important part of the future of transport in this country. So we are all about connecting the country. We have the same 3 imperatives that have served us well over the last 6 or 7 years, which is safety, delivery, and customer service. But we're now layering in new challenges. So there's been much talk about digital and enabling a digital future. We've recently released or published our plans for digital roads, and of course the environment. So My team were very excited about me coming here, and they've given me masses of stuff to share. So I'm going to try and draw out some of the key points, and then you can ask questions about anything else. So I'll just cover a few general points, and then some specific things about this region. So the future of roads. Has the pandemic changed our view of that future? I mean, if we cast our minds back 18 months or so, and we all started working or many of us started working from home, and we all have been talking about changes in the pattern of work, hybrid working. What is the future of transport? Well, what have we seen from the point of view of the strategic road network? We saw a big drop. If you go back to March of last year, to get my calendar right, we saw a big drop in the volumes of traffic, number of people using our roads. But it's recovered, and it recovered quite quickly. And not only has it recovered, so we're already back at pre-pandemic volumes, but if we look specifically at heavy goods vehicles, they're about 5% higher than before the pandemic. And we should think about that, because you all hear about the shortage of drivers and so on, so there must be some constraint there. And with light goods vehicles, we're nearer 7 to 8% higher than we were before the pandemic. So demand is there, and projections are it will continue to grow. After all, we're all shopping online, I guess, so that's driving it. So the strategic road network is important for moving goods around the country. And here's an interesting fact. We talk a lot about multimodal transport, a multimodal shift. It's important, and we support that, but 79% of freight miles in the UK are on roads, the strategic road network and other roads. And if you were to increase rail miles by 10%, you would only remove 1% from road. So there's an interesting fact to ponder. So we're in road period 2. Has anything changed because of the pandemic? I think not. I mean, I think the aims and objectives remain relevant. We have some pretty serious targets, which are to reduce the number of people killed and seriously injured by 50% in this 5-year period, to reduce congestion, and to make some positive steps on the road to carbon neutrality. And I'll talk about our ambitious plans there in a moment. £27 billion, it's not all on new roads. At least half of it is to look after the roads that we already have. And of course, the backdrop to that is we have a lot of structures, bridges, that were built in the 60s and 70s, and they're getting older. So the amount of work we have to look after the assets we already have is growing and will continue to grow into the future. And digital roads. We've set out our vision for this. So this is about connected customers, about digital design and construction, but also about how we operate the roads. And you can see a lot of that technology already on the smart motorways we've been rolling out. And then I come to our decarbonisation plan. So we published our decarbonisation plan following the government's transport decarbonisation plan in July. It's an ambitious plan, and I think it is important to reflect that, I mentioned we're investing £27 billion in this road period. Hopefully there will be a similar sum in the third road period. And with huge investment does come a huge responsibility for the environment. Surface transport is a big emitter of greenhouse gases. Something like 22% of the total UK greenhouse gas emissions come from transport. So we have collectively a huge responsibility to do something about this. So as I mentioned, we issued our plan earlier in the summer. We have 3 very clear targets in it. They're ambitious targets that by 2030, our direct operations will be net zero. By 2040, our maintenance and construction will be net zero. And then in line with the government's aspirations, by 2050, road user emissions will be net zero. It's a big challenge, but we've already made good progress on that. In the first road period, we've made reductions in our own carbon emissions of 25%. And we've managed to do a few schemes now at carbon neutrality, the A590 in the northwest. We managed to get very close to carbon neutrality in the way that we constructed it, and now in the way that we're operating it. So the opportunities, the innovation is there and is growing. So the challenge is there, we're up for the challenge, it matters. And then there were some questions earlier about biodiversity. So in this road period, our target is no net loss, and we're making good progress against that. As we look into the future, we need to be focusing on net positive gain, and there are huge challenges, both just in the operation of what we have, but also in the construction of new schemes. But we are, through many partnerships, finding really significant opportunities to enhance biodiversity, and I'm really looking forward to increasing the number of partnerships and the scope to have even more impact on biodiversity. So that's a lot about what we're doing in general. What about in this region? It's great that we're doing this all over the country, but what about here? There's huge growth, as has been said, within this region, both in housing and in economic development. I took my leadership team to Cambridge last week, where we had a bit of a digital summit. It was really good to see firsthand some of the development. I had the chance to drive the A14, which was a very important scheme that we've delivered in this region on time, in fact ahead of time and on budget, which is quite impressive for a £1 billion plus scheme. But to see the economic development there firsthand was impressive, and to focus on what the digital future looks like for us it was interesting, because many of us take different things from it. Is it all about connected vehicles, flying cars, or is it also about getting great information to road users so they can make good decisions about their journeys? No one actually starts their journey on our network or ends it, so being able to connect and give people well-informed choices when they're going to drive on a network really matters. Through our designated funds, we're also supporting a lot of schemes around active travel, so cycling, horse riding, support for communities around buses, trams, I think, but not in this region. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. So we've got, for this 5-year period, something like £1 billion to invest in sustainability, active transport, environment and innovation. And we're always open to ideas on what we can do with that to support communities. Touching on some of the schemes that we've got in development now, Black Cat, the A428, that's going to be an investment of around £1 billion. And I think, as has been said already, many of the schemes now are looking at east-west connectivity. I mean, historically, this country has been very driven with north-south connectivity. So we're now beginning to develop some very good east-west strategic schemes. It's a scheme that is going to cut journey times, support local and regional economic growth, and will help life, I think, in the villages that surround it. It's quite a complex 3-tier junction, so it's a big scheme. And at the moment, we're around a third of the way through the development consent order process, so the planning permission to be able to crack on with that scheme. As we've seen with other DCOs like the A303 at Stonehenge, it is getting harder to get the DCOs through. We're working hard on it, but it is important that we take everyone with us on this work. On the A34 in Oxfordshire, between the M4 and the M40, we're now working on, we're exploring the opportunities there to reduce congestion and improve safety. We've done some work already on that route, but again, that's a key route, both in terms of connecting the region with ports in the south, at Portsmouth, Southampton, but also locally. It's somewhere I live quite close to, so it's quite close to my heart, that scheme. And we're looking to continue to develop the partnerships we've created around that route to develop it. And then the final thing I was going to mention was the Oxcam ARC study. So there are a number of elements we're looking at in that study. The study is due to run until spring of next year, and we're looking at things like the case for dualling the A45, amongst other things. This will inform what we want to do into the third road period, and probably the fourth beyond it. And so I'll finish by just talking about the future, so coming back to the future road building. We're only a year and a half into this 5-year road period, but we're already working very hard on the third road period and beyond. And our work with subnational transport bodies like yourselves is an incredibly important part of informing the choices that we will make as we draw together our plans and submit our business case for the next road period. So I would encourage engagement in that, collaboration. You can provide input to that process through the National Highways website, and I'm sure the team will be arranging plenty of events to be working with you to capture your strategic thoughts on the region so that we can ensure that we're reflecting those in our thoughts for the future. I'll pause at that point. Thank you very much.
Right, time for a few questions. I'm going to kick off. I'm going to dip into Slido and come to the back there initially. Thanks very much, the two of you. I'm going to look upwards and then maybe across. What do you both want to see? I asked Mayor Dave earlier, what is your kind of like your minimum measure of success from the spending review next week? Will?
That they fund the scheme in its entirety. No, let's be realistic, that's not likely to happen, because actually that's not the decision that's being taken at this spending review. The decision that's being taken at this spending review is actually what we do over the next 3 years to be able to progress and accelerate the development of the East West Rail scheme. And so for me, the primary focus is that we get 3 years of really good, secure funding so we can press on through the development of the scheme, submit the DCO, submit the final business case, and it's at that point that we unlock the long-term funding to actually deliver the whole scheme. So for me, real focus on making sure we secure the next 3 years of development to progress East West Rail.
Nick, anything on your menu of success measures?
Spending review. Well, I'm sure it's shaping up to be a very tough spending review, and I'm looking forward to hearing the outcome next week. I mean, we have a 5-year settlement, so I've optimism, confidence that to a certain extent will survive the spending review. There are some adjustments to it. I mean, we've had, as I touched in my remarks, some schemes have moved to the right because of challenges around planning process. So I'm hoping that the spending review recognises that in a reasonable way while still protecting our investments.
Well, looking slightly more outward then, I mean, what you mentioned, Will, that you need people to not deliver things in the same old way. I mean, can you expand on that? What are you looking for this supply chain to be, delivering over the next few years to help you to meet your objectives? And similarly with you, Nick.
So from my perspective, in terms of local communities, it's actually really good engagement. We've been having some really important conversations because it is absolutely critical for us that East West Rail is part of that integrated transport system across England's economic heartland, and really making sure we get that local intelligence so we plug into that system and deliver the enhanced connectivity that's not just Oxford to Cambridge, but is much broader than that. In terms of the supply chain, we're really thinking about how we develop a very integrated model for the railway, and using the latest technology to help us do that. And we'll be keen to have partners who work with us to develop that much more integrated view of the transport system than you might have had before.
Okay. Nick, anything particular?
Yeah, and I think I'd touch on 2 or 3 things. One is supporting union connectivity and the economy. That matters now more than anything. As I mentioned, we have to do things in an environmentally sustainable way. So carbon neutrality really matters. If we can't, we need roads for the future. If we can't do it in a carbon and environmentally sustainable way, we have a problem. So that is a challenge we have to solve. It is important that we support the needs of communities. Shifts in transport, many of them that you've heard today already, and there isn't one solution to everything, so not everything can happen on the strategic road network. It is going to be about how we shift from one mode to another and supporting everyone in the way that they want to travel.
Great. There's a question on the floor here. Where is it? There. Yeah, far away, and then I'll come here. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Anthony Swift from Luton Council. It was a question for Will. You mentioned there's a big focus on the user, and I just wanted to understand, in terms of the design of new stations, potentially relocated or resited stations, and the trains that call on them, are there any assurances you could provide that they will all be completely accessible for those with physical mobility impairments?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work on thinking through that full journey for everyone who travels on East West Rail. We're very focused on creating East West Rail that works for everyone, and actually, one of the things you'll have seen in our consultation is that in terms of where we site stations and those sorts of things. So, for example, actually the way you choose your station location makes quite a difference to being able to get level access and all those sorts of things. So we're thinking about the decisions we can take now that make it much easier to build in not just sort of adequate provision, but so that people are able to use our railway, whatever your sort of physical abilities in pretty much the same way.
Okay. Question from Slido. I'm going to come over there in a minute, but questions from Slido. Councillor Renard, yeah. You say, would Nick not agree to... I've got to put my glasses on. The best way to alleviate traffic pressure on the A34 is to upgrade the A420.
Gosh. Possibly. I mean, when we're looking at the A34, of course, we're doing much wider modelling to see not just what we do on the A34, but the impact of other roads. So, and there was, because originally when we were looking at the Oxcam study, it did include the A34 all the way down to the M3, and there were a number of options we were looking at for the alignment as it passes Oxford. So I can't comment specifically on that, but as we do the modelling for it, we will be looking at the impact of other roads. So, yeah, no, good point.
Slightly wider point from Barry Andrews. Nick, the name change to National Highways. Is there a future alignment of road infrastructure between local and strategic partners?
So, I mean, the number of answers to that, I think. When we think about the way the DFT is organised, our Director General, Emma Ward, covers both the strategic road network and local roads. So we are having a lot of conversations about how we can support, interact and work with what is happening with local and local major roads. I don't see that we will have a role directly in that space, but we do have a very important role in coordinating and working with local roads. Okay, and one extra one before I come over there. The plan for the Heartland is to reduce private car journeys 15 to 30% by 2050. What is your forecast plan for reducing traffic flow? So the forecast we have, and of course the forecasts are going through a revision over the next 18 months, is on the strategic road network, is that there is not a reduction. And in fact, at the moment, there is work that needs to be done on the projections around the switch to electric vehicles, because some of the projections at the moment are for a significant increase, because the cost of every other mile once you've made the investment in electric vehicles is much lower than for diesel or petrol cars. So no doubt we're all going to be talking about road pricing and other issues.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting balance there. Question from the floor there? Yes. There was one over here as well, wasn't there? Put your hand up.
Answered my question. So you've actually just asked and answered my question.
Oh, right, okay. Well, just move over here.
What happens when all of those electric cars arrive in the towns and the roads are already full? So
supplementary, what happens when they all arrive in the towns?
Yeah, so I think I go back to my comments, we have to think about the total journey, not just the journey on the strategic road network. I mean, yes, it is about private cars, but for us it is much more about freight. Freight is the significant driver of investment in the strategic road network.
Okay. While I get there, can I just, there's one coming in for that will East-West Rail's work finish when Oxford to Cambridge are connected, or will they look to extend connections, e.g. reopening Bedford to Northampton?
Look, ultimately that will be a decision for government. All I'd say is, as I said earlier on, the enormity of this scheme, when you get into all the complexity to deliver Oxford to Cambridge, there's more than enough for us to be getting on with over the next few years.
Okay.
A question for Will. My name's Neil Middleton from Rail Future. What is to be done to make Bedford Station a station fit for East-West Rail, in particular with good interchange between north and south, and incentives on the operator on the North Sound line to actually call it Bedford, which at the moment is a big problem for them?
So, we set out in our sort of route option decision why we thought connecting through Bedford was really important. We've set out again in our recent consultation some of the thinking around what Bedford's, the connectivity around Bedford needs to look like, and we're going to continue, one, listening to what we've heard in the consultation, two, our engagement with a local authority there to understand what is absolutely necessary to make sure we do something that works for Bedford as part of the national rail network, but also part of a local sort of transport connectivity. So very committed to that. Okay.
Last point, must move on then. Is there any, I've heard the word catenary mentioned in the context of road freight. Are there any opportunities for electrifying freight, or is hydrogen better?
Gosh, yes. Well, quick answer to that. So we are supporting a scheme at the moment. We're going to be building with others a 30-kilometre, I think 30-kilometre run, 30-mile. May have got that wrong. Catenary trial on the network to look at electrifying HGVs. There was another scheme I saw which had a kind of a side-mounted electrical power source. So it was almost like the trucks would grab onto the barrier. I'm not sure whether that's going to work for a number of technical issues, but we are, as I said, supporting the trial of a catenary section. I think we can't write off hydrogen, and let's see. Yeah.
I'll come back. Final question, Will, is here. What are the blockers for an electrified East-West Rail? Seems strange to assume it diesel given the transport decarbonisation plan. What's stopping it?
So, look, I hope we've been clear that we are looking for a decarbonised solution on East-West Rail. Full overhead line electrification, does have affordability challenges. We shouldn't ignore that, particularly in an environment where there are going to be affordability choices. What you invest here, you won't be able to invest there because there will be a limited amount of money. Also, full overhead line electrification does have a visual impact. So there are a variety of things. There's a lot going for it, but there are some challenges associated with it as well. And that's why I think it is right if we can look at new technologies, which mean we might not need full overhead line electrification, but that still delivers decarbonized rail. I personally think it's worth investing the time to do that work and to make the case to government. So don't read the fact that we haven't committed to full overhead line electrification to say that we're not committed to decarbonised transport.
Great stuff. We heard it here first. Will, Nick, thank you very much indeed. I've got to call it a close. We've gone 10 minutes over, but it was such good fun. Thank you very much.